Okay, take two. I think the microphone. Oh yeah, I think it's work. Okay, yeah, it's working. Okay, that's my check. So yeah, take two. The first one, I'm still pretty sweaty. That was like pretty much all that I had time to talk about before I realized the microphone wasn't working. But my glisten, my natural glisten that I bring to each of these. I don't know, the fact is I don't really know what it is because I'll sit down here and do calls with people and this doesn't really happen. Like if it's just, regular whatever. So, okay, I'm gonna but then like when I sit down to do this, the glisten. Okay, so I've got like 25 minutes to do this, so I'm going to get into it. So one of the first things I'm going to point out is this next section. We're in chapter 10 in the seventh hub. And this is, once again, this is a supplement to folks who are reading the book. It can make sense or be useful for people who are not currently reading the book, but, my intention is that I'm reading it cover to cover and providing some context and even companionship in the process of reading it. So for people who, it's overwhelming for everybody, like everybody, including myself. It's like a very there's just a lot of gravity to it. There's a lot, like it has a sort of centrifugal like force to it. So this is kind of thing like we're doing this together. And so today what I'm reading, and one of the things is why a relatively short section is actually going to, I'm giving its own reading to, as you'll see here in the book, Parallax. It's one or on page 249. It's one section. And then we see here back in page 2 of 43, and this is in chapter 3, is that we have parallax, an ever-changing perspective, and that goes from page 43 to 44. Now, the reason I'm pointing this out is something that I have alluded to in other readings, which is that this book actually like creates an infinite loop and folds in on itself as it becomes increasingly clear as we keep going, is the mapping of part 1, the individual chapters, to the actual parts of the book, and how it kind of, the idea is it sort of wraps you right around, so it begins again once you end the book. So, I mean, I don't know if that, in the model of trying to complete something, like that might feel like really unsatisfying, especially if you've just read a very, like a textbook essentially that's 230 some odd pages or whatever, 200, whatever. So anyway, so I'm going to get into it now. So we're talking parallax. Now, before I get into it, I'm going to explain one thing, which is that parallax. So this in the section that introduces these notions that wind up coming back in the end, and they're introduced in the beginning and likely to be forgotten, because it's not like, I mean, one of the things is like if you've been along to any extent this far, it's knowing it's like would be really hard to sort of, especially in our first pass, carry pieces of information from previous sections. However, the design of it is to give a taste to these notions that do apply to all of the hubs, but the actual development of the component of the hub doesn't happen until like the end of the development of our nervous system. But the forces at play that shape our nervous system are, within nature. And that nature, it's nature is our nature is the name of the section. But and this also points to another notion, which is that conscious reclamation requires the seventh hub. It requires prefrontal cortex. It requires the ability to reason, to think, to understand. Like in order to do the work that involves the conscious reclamation of each of the hubs and the deeper components of it that relate to like reflex, somatics, the emotion, all of that to be able to see it and understand it, it requires this instrument. So it's introducing some of these notions early on in the book in a particular way that is more tied to a first hub, because we're talking about nature very specifically, and here we're getting kind of more expansive. But anyway, this is for those Parinama fans out there, the inside scoop for the creation of this. Okay, so I'm gonna read. So I guess what I'm planning on doing is reading both of the sections. So I'm gonna read the chapter 10 section for Parallax, and then I'm gonna go into chapter 3, and I'm gonna read that section. We're just gonna see how they fit together. And and one thing is parallax is very similar to the word perspective. So in terms of the construction of this, which was getting into, where the clarity of these notions like like ambiguity and nuance and paradox and these qualities that are really essential for the expansion and development here, is that parallax is like the notion of perspective. But so perspective, like so if it's kind of like what's parallax, and it's like that's kind of like sort of a whole word, is to just like kind of replace it with perspective. The perspective is going to be a really informing point of like how we orient ourselves around our lives and ourselves, and even how we come to understand things. And one of the things about parallax is the notion is that your position relative to something changes. So it's the same notion as perspective, but it just provides some kind of like sort of a moving contextual element to it, which is why I chose that and stuck with it. So parallax, so every perspective is both correct and relative, and where we stand informs our perspective. Parallax represents the uniqueness of our perspective and incorporates the direction and speed of travel relative to what we observe. And that's see chapter 3, which we will do. As adults, when we rewatch a movie or reread a book, we relate to different characters and different aspects of the story. When we are absolutely certain of our opinions, it helps to remember that our perspective has changed throughout our lives and will likely change again. In Star Wars: Return of the Jedi, Obi-Wan counsels Luke that he's, and this is the quote, going to find that many of the truths we cling to depend greatly on our own point of view. Yeah, again, it's like, that Luke is going to find that many of the truths we cling to depend greatly on our own point of view. It's funny, my editor didn't love that. That was one hill I kind of died on. Like, there weren't many things I pushed back when my editor said, I don't think that's great. It's funny because for me, the sentiment is extraordinary. And the other thing is Luke, my cat. Luke Skywalker. And Luke is the acronym for Parinama, which is learn, understand, know, and expand. So we got that going for us. But I stand by it on its like merit. It's freestanding merit. So I'm gonna read the as a notion. Okay, so I'm gonna read from page 43. So parallax is an ever-changing perspective. So your perspective on life is the result of your unique inclinations combined with specific experiences, circumstances, level of maturity, and other variables that add up to being a life that is completely yours. Parallax goes deeper into our concept of what it means to have perspective. It not only considers your relative position to something, okay, so I spoilered that, but also how the direction and speed of travel influence perception. Instead of perspective or context, I use parallax. Okay, like, oh my gosh, why do I even give any framing on this? Like, oh my God. Um, So I use parallax because we're oriented and because how we're oriented and how we approach something affects how we perceive it. Also, orientation and approach shift and change throughout our lives. And parallax introduces the reality that perspective and context are always moving and changing. So we may agree with people on important things, but if we're honest, we rarely, if ever, agree on everything. Even choosing how and what we focus on influences our perspective. Try taking, oh, this thing. Try taking a picture of the moon. The camera's viewfinder introduces a broader perspective until we actively shift its focus. Until we zoom in, the massive moon seems with the naked eye the massive moon seen with the naked eye is a pinprick of light in the vast sky. Grasping the reality that our perspective and the factors that affect it is unique to us not only grants us our singular version of reality, but also opens the aperture for awareness and respect for the views of others. Well, see that? Like, that was some writing right there. Aperture. After talking about shutter. Oof, look at me go. Wow. What a impressive uh we all hold certainties based on the experiences that shaped our lives, but if we feel like someone wants to understand us, we're more likely to hear them out, and vice versa. Your perspective and internal truth are woven into the cloth of this shared humanity, which in turn is woven from the 8 billion threads. We are all entwined, sharing the same experience from different positions. Yeah. Yeah, that is so yeah, I mean, you've got like relativity in there. I'm trying to think if anything's like come up in terms of thinking there. Um, so one thing as far as exercising this, because part of what this is doing is expanding the capacity to incorporate new information. Because one thing in the Parinama tangle previously the hairball the notion previously known as the hairball is that it's like, so once again, I should have like a little chart of this. It's like that our experiences and circumstances from early in life like shape adaptive reflexes that correspond with the facet of the nervous system and what it was exposed to. So we create reflexes that supported our, I guess you could call it like survival, adaptation, whatever. And then we create beliefs that rationalize those reflexes that we have. Like there's a lot of like, hey, that's just me kind of stuff with like people who are like really snappy or defensive or whatever. It's just like, I'm just defensive. It's like, well, right. Now, the thing that we're like that parallax and even in introducing that notion is trying to introduce is that to like be able to start to and we're hitting this from a lot of different angles is to be able to conceive that our perspective is has limitation, and as a result of that open up the possibility of like the infinity of the different ways to see something, and that there's more information that we do not see from our sort of factory settings. Our factory settings have like contain limitation. So part of parallax is starting to like exercise that to see to what extent that goes, and it goes and goes and it goes and goes. I'm laughing. I don't know why. But so one way here, and it would be a very Parinama thing, is to read books, especially for like Fifth Hub. Even any like read books, listen to music, watch movies, watch TV shows, um, that you haven't watched So for, for something that's, like, nostalgic and is, like, creates, like has been, like, an ongoing use for, like, comfort, for, like, that, not so much that isn't gonna, because that's gonna have, like, has been continuously recontextualized, over time. It's looking for something where it's like you haven't, like, watched it. So it's kinda like, "Oh, yeah, I remember going to that movie when I was in junior high or whatever," and, like, watch it again. And there's like, one of the things that's, like, a really sort of, like, broad strokes point is looking at it from the perspective of, like, just relating to people who are closer to your age now. So it's like watching a movie where, like, once you were the kid and all you saw was the kid and the adults were boring, and now it's like the adults are the part where you're, like, kind of seeing the movie through their perspective. And even re so one of the things that can happen is it can conjure up, um, like, recollections of, like, how, like, thought processes or feelings at a certain point. And if you're ready to explore them, if you're ready to kind of be present and see them, then you've got that going on. Right now, culturally, we have a significant shift in terms of awakening happening as you have platforms like TikTok that are actually starting to impact, perception by providing new points of view in ways that previously were, were not as animated, like the short form video style of actually listening to somebody talk and seeing them provide images and express themselves in a way that, like, really displays their humanity. And also there's something about how TikTok works, which is that it, like, you don't choose it. It kind of finds you and it sort of figures out what you want. Yeah, I don't know how to exactly articulate it, but and it's kind of the revealing that's happening right now with many people who grew up with a notion of, I mean, I don't know when people are gonna watch this, so I'm kinda like, what, it just, yeah. Yeah, because this is like from a time perspective, but there's something very actively happening right now. Certainly even, certainly happening for me as well. Like, and I was without, I was somebody who considered myself to be, like, pretty conscientious. And so my own unfolding is very active right now. And I think one thing to just point to that is it's work. And actually it's work. Okay, this is a good thing to end on. It's work. And, I think there's kind of like this thing, there's a bit of a notion that's like work is like things people under, like, what, like being busy and doing things and in like running errands and going to meetings and, whatever. But the work of actually, yeah. And this fits with the seventh hub, which is like the need to have space. Um, it's a different kind of work and it's harder than, like, conventional work in the sense that it's not sanctioned, like, it's not precedented. You don't see a lot of people who are like, "I'm really, like, working on this thing," and it has no like, I'm processing something, I'm integrating something, I'm really sort of, like, shifting myself, and that takes the special attention to yourself, special care for yourself, special patience, curiosity, like, in that patience, like, kind of a loving curiosity, um, and, like, the ability and willingness to watch yourself move through different iterations. But yeah. Yeah, it's disruptive, and I think that, one of the frustrations certainly, that I can find myself having is the frustration, with, like, people, like actively engaging in their oblivion, and it's a projection because it's like I'm oblivious, like, it's like we're all oblivious, like once, if we kind of go back to the framing of parallax, where, it's to what extent we're hyper sort of sensitive and very clear about our perspective, but um closed off, or like not attentive to the notion that the lived experience for jeez, I just watched this guy take a package and throw it over the fence, and he like literally, it was like an underhand, like aggressive throw. Fuck. I wonder what that is in the package. I hope it's not breakable. He looks kind of like a proud boy too. Okay. Yeah. Okay. All right. Okay. I don't know. Time to get back on track here. Okay. So, yeah. 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 Not that much more to say. But if you can see me, if Kristen, if you're watching, this is my 1989 era, my Taylor Swift earrings, and I'll be seeing you later today after the lunch that I have. I have to go mail some stuff. But anyway, sending you lots of love. Mhm. Yeah. Yeah. Sending you lots of love. And just a hope that if, what, like, being in this process of consciously reclaiming aspects of yourself is that, like, then, like, that there's just time, over, like, kind of, you think like recovery in a sense, like, with exercising, where it's like, um, the analogy of like when you lift weights, you're actually like tearing muscle fiber, and like the fitness is gained in the actual recovery. The exercise is like damaging. The recovery is the, like, it's where the additional strength is gained, which is, yeah, it's like an adaptation. It's, I mean, look, they're not negative. They're only negative when they're like outlived their usefulness. And this is something I think it's also important to remember, is that it's like these adaptations that we're like softening, dissolving, disintegrating, whatever, is that it's not that it's just this terrible thing. It's this thing that is just, it's a non-reactive aspect. Like when the adaptation is reactive and it's actually alive and responding to something, it's like everything. It's like this like really encouraging thing that maps even back to first hub trust of ourselves, of our ability to like adapt and like work through things. And it's more like the shedding of them after the circumstance or the experience has left, that we can like return to trust. That's a good one. Wow. Thank you, whatever gave that. I love that. Okay. So anyway, I'm sending you lots of love. Again, any comments I'll answer, which hasn't been kind of too much of a thing because there haven't been any. But any interaction is, of course, appreciated. And once again, if there's something you want to share with me, and you don't have my contact information, my personal contact information, you can direct message me at the Parinoma Method. Show you here. Parinoma Method on Instagram. Yeah. Okay. Bye for now. See you next time.